Okay, everyone, welcome back. Last time we covered numbers 10 through 6 of my top 10 favorite summer horror movies. So today we're going to be doing my top 5. If you want a link to part 1 of this video, I'll put it below. So with that, let's get it started. Okay, coming in at number 5, we have 2017's It, which is based on the Stephen King book, directed by Andy Muschietti. And it's not a remake, but a lot of people associate the story of It with the Tim Curry one from the 80s. But this one in particular, I really enjoy. It's about a group of outcast kids during summer vacation and how they're dealing with Pennywise and trying to uncover why so many kids have gone missing in the town. Because they're outcast kids, they're part of a gang called the Losers Club. It feels like a real group of kids hanging out during that summer break. That's why I think it's very much a summer movie. The town of Derry feels alive, strangely nostalgic at times. It's a very lived-in place. It feels like small town USA. Being a Stephen King story, I wouldn't expect anything less, but they did a really good job of conveying that. It feels like a town that I know. One of the biggest strengths of the movie is you actually end up caring about all these kids. Like you're genuinely concerned with what happens to each one of them, especially some of the bad stuff that's happening to them that doesn't even have to do with Pennywise. Like, for being a horror movie, it's a very coming-of-age movie. It feels like a horror version of Stand By Me. Bill Skarsgård plays Pennywise. He chews up the scenery, does a fantastic job. I still think I prefer Tim Curry's version from the 1980s miniseries, but man, there's a reason why they're doing a modern miniseries with It, Welcome to Derry, because Bill Skarsgård really does make Pennywise his own character, and absolutely one of the biggest reasons that this movie just works. It definitely captures that feel of summer vacation at times. With the small town atmosphere, you got storm drains, abandoned houses, quarries, and empty streets. It just gives it a really cool atmosphere. The visual style and the soundtrack give a very nostalgic energy. I think it does a good job of balancing being a strong horror movie, but also a blockbuster movie at the same time. It's, to this day, the highest grossing horror movie of all time. And I also think that between It and It Chapter 2, it is easily the better movie. I think it's a modern horror movie that absolutely deserves its place among the list of classic summer horror movies in general. And that's why I would put it on my list at number 5. So with that is 2017's It. All right, at number 4, we have Sleepaway Camp from 1983, directed by Robert Hiltzik. This movie is awesome. I think it's one of the most infamous and unforgettable summer camp slasher movies I've ever seen. The plot follows a shy and traumatized girl named Angela who's sent to Camp Airwick with her cousin Ricky. Once these two arrive at camp, people slowly start dying in brutal and mysterious ways. This was one of the first slasher movies that I ever watched that really had that who is the killer vibe that ended up being such a big thing in slasher movies. I think Camp Airwick feels like one of the most believable summer camps in any slasher camp movie I've ever seen. The teenagers and camp counselors look like they're of age. They don't look older than they should be. The dialogue is campy, no pun intended, but it's great. There's a lot of good one-liners in the movie. I think it has that grimy early 80s slasher energy where everything just feels humid, uncomfortable, buggy, just like you're at camp. When you're hanging out with the kids during the day, it's very, very bright, brighter than most summer camp movies I've seen. And then when it gets into the dark parts of the movie, it gets very dark as far as the nighttime setting goes. Despite the movie's relatively low budget, the kills are just awesome. Just very, very memorable kills. Like a lot of summer camp slasher movies, it doesn't rely on supernatural tones. There's a killer there, and who is it, which makes it great. Felissa Rose does an awesome job playing Angela, and Ricky's nonstop attitudes and insults really add to the movie as far as humor. There's this constant sense like something's not right here throughout the whole movie, which I just love. And of course, we got to talk a little bit about the ending without talking about it. Let's just say it is top tier shocking endings I've ever seen. I went into this not knowing the ending. I know a lot of people who haven't even seen this movie know about the ending. Do yourself a favor. If you've never seen this movie, go into it blind, not knowing the ending. You will be blown away. It is crazy. Once you're done talking about this movie, you'll instantly go to somebody and be like, man, I watched this movie Sleepaway Camp. This was messed up. I think it's a true cult classic that perfectly captures the essence of a summer camp horror movie. And when I was coming up with doing this, this was absolutely one of the movies that I thought of instantly about putting on my list of top 10 summer horror movies. So with that, at number 4 is 1983's Sleepaway Camp. Go check it out. All right, at number 3, we have Return of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead came out in 1985. It was directed by Dan O'Bannon, and it is quite possibly my favorite zombie movie ever made. I think it's one of the most unique zombie movies ever made because it mixes horror, comedy, punk rock, and chaos all in one. The movie has loose ties to Night of the Living Dead because the opening setup jokes that the events of the movie Night of the Living Dead were based on a real incident.
Let me ask you a question, kid. Did you see that movie, Night of the Living Dead?
The plot follows a group of workers at a medical supply warehouse who accidentally release toxic gas that reanimates the dead. Once the gas spreads, the entire night spirals into complete chaos. This is the movie that made popular zombies screaming. Instead of traditional slow zombies, these zombies are loud, aggressive, sometimes intelligent, and because of the practical effects, they're occasionally terrifying. This feels to me like one of the ultimate one insane night summer horror movies. You're also hanging out with a group of punk rock teenagers on top of the workers at the medical supply. They become zombies themselves. Because of the punk rock teenagers, it gives it this very party vibe from beginning to end. The punk rock soundtrack has great energy. The song Party Time by 45 Grave it's one of the great horror movie songs, in my opinion. I think what makes this a great summer movie outside of the soundtrack is just the cemetery setting, the nightmare atmosphere, the bonfires, the rainstorms, and the partying teens. And then also, I've been really emphasizing it with the atmosphere of what makes a good summer movie, but the heat and the sweat. There's a lot of that in this movie. I think the movie balances horror and comedy very well. It's taking itself seriously, but at the same time, it gives you time to laugh. One of the scariest ideas in this movie is that these zombies cannot be stopped traditionally. The practical effects and the zombie makeup look great to this day. They look so good. The pacing is one of my favorite things of this movie. That's why I can pop it in at any point. Every summer I watch this movie. It captures the spirit of staying out way too late during summer vacation. I honestly think it's one of the greatest cult horror movies of the 1980s and of all time. I would put it up there with one of the most rewatchable zombie movies ever made. I do like zombie movies, but some of them I'm kind of one and done. I don't really have much else to say about it, but besides it's just that it's a true summer horror classic to me because it feels loud, reckless, dangerous, and funny, and highly rewatchable. And so at number 3, we got Return of the Living Dead. All right, at number 2, we have Friday the 13th Part 2. Now, Friday the 13th Part 2 came out in 1981 and was directed by Steve Miner. It is personally my favorite Friday the 13th movie, and I think it's one of the most important and influential summer camp slasher movies ever made. This is the movie that introduces Jason Voorhees as the killer. And instead of having his iconic hockey mask right away, he actually comes out with a burlap sack. And as much as I enjoy hockey mask Jason, burlap sack Jason feels raw, creepy. He feels more unsettling to me than hockey mask Jason. And he just feels like a dude who's been living in the woods for 15 years and is just out to kill people. He also just feels like a backwoods campfire legend brought to life. The plot is this: it follows a new group of camp counselors training near Camp Crystal Lake. Even though everybody around the campfire knows the story of Jason, they slowly realize that the nightmare may actually be real. I think the reason this movie works so damn well is because it leans into that campfire tale atmosphere. The movie feels isolated, quiet, and uncomfortable. The fact that it's the first time that you see Jason, and he's not only is he an urban legend, but his mom is an urban legend, it just adds to that unsettling nature of the whole thing. The cabins, the woods, the campfires, the lakes, the nighttime hikes, the sex, and the counselors hanging out make this feel like a pure summer horror movie. It captures the feeling of being away at camp where everything feels fun during the day but absolutely terrifying at night. The setting around Camp Crystal Lake is one of the most iconic settings ever. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's even not into horror and they don't know what Camp Crystal Lake is. To me, the movie feels much more grounded and a lot grimier than future sequels to the Friday the 13th series. The pacing is slower and moodier in a good way to me because that builds the suspense. That's where when I'm watching this movie, like I genuinely am creeped out at points. Like most of the Friday the 13th movies don't scare me per se. This one doesn't necessarily scare me, but it definitely creeps me out. That's why it's my favorite. I think it's also one of the best examples of that early 80s slasher atmosphere before that slasher style became incredibly formulaic. Amy Steele does a great job as Jenny too. She's the final girl in this one. I think she's hands down the best final girl in the entire Friday the 13th series. That's another reason why I put this one as not only my favorite, but I've argued with people that I think it's the best Friday the 13th movie. The movie balances that suspense, camp atmosphere, and kills incredibly well. I've talked a lot throughout this top 10 list about heat being a big factor in a summer horror movie. I think this has that classic humid summer night feeling where everything feels sticky, isolated, and just dark. And then it has that nighttime woods atmosphere that is some of the best in the entire franchise. One of the biggest reasons why I prefer part 2 over any of the other Friday the 13th is because it still feels like a genuine horror movie before the series just became self-aware and comedic in nature. And I genuinely think it's one of the definitive summer camp movies and one of the definitive horror movies of the 1980s. That's a big, big reason why I was very happy to put Friday the 13th Part 2 as number 2 on my list. So with that, Friday the 13th Part 2. All right, and finally coming in at number 1, we have Jaws. Now, Jaws came out in 1975 and was directed by Steven Spielberg and was based on the novel by Peter Benchley. It stars Roy Schneider as Chief Brody, Robert Shaw as Quint, Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper, and Lorraine Gray as Ellen Brody. For some people, it's going to be no surprise that I put this as number 1 because what a tentpole movie, man. This was not only the first summer horror movie that was probably a massive hit, but it was the first summer blockbuster movie. Like this, Jaws is massive. Everybody knows Jaws. The plot is simple but perfect, man. A great white shark attacks people near the beach town of Amity Island during peak summer tourist season. Chief Brody wants to close the beaches, but the town leaders care more about summer money and tourism than public safety. That setup alone makes it one of the ultimate summer horror movies because the danger is directly tied to summer vacation. The horror comes from the place everyone wants to be in the summer, the beach. It takes something relaxing, sunny, and fun, and it turns it into something absolutely terrifying. Without Jaws, the idea of this summer blockbuster probably does not exist in the same way it does to this day. Jaws came out before Star Wars. It came out before E.T. It came out before Indiana Jones. It came out before Batman. It came out before Superman. Like, none of the... I'm not saying any of these movies wouldn't have been hits, but Jaws was absolutely the first real summer blockbuster. This movie basically changed how Hollywood released big tentpole movies. And before slashers took over summer camps, cabins, road trips, and lakes, Jaws proved that summer could absolutely be terrifying. It's not just a shark movie, it's a movie about fear running an entire summer town. Amity Island feels like a real vacation town, which makes the horror hit way harder. Between the beaches, the boats, the docks, the 4th of July crowds, the small town politics, and the ocean setting, it just feels like pure summer. The absolute strength of what makes Jaws a horror movie is that you don't see the shark. You don't see the shark till almost the very end, and it proves that the freakiest things and the most terrifying things are the things you can't see sometimes. And that is something that to this day horror movies use, exploit, take advantage of all of that in a wonderful way. It really makes me think that this was the movie that set up the formula for what makes a good jump scare in a movie. John Williams' score is one of the most iconic things in not only big blockbuster movies, but in horror movies. You hear the do-dum, 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 do-dum. It gives you goosebumps on your neck, man. Like, it makes your hair stand up. It's great. Roy Schneider is absolutely the human center as Brody. He's just the everyman who just wants to protect the beach town. Richard Dreyfuss, I think, as Hooper, brings a fantastic energy and intellect to the movie. It's not only one of Richard Dreyfuss's earliest movies, but it's honestly one of his best movies. Robert Shaw as Quint, though, is my favorite. He's a gritty, old school monster hunting seaman, man. And he is the heart and soul of the movie to me. He is the most memorable character, bar none. The final act on the boat almost comes out as a completely different movie than the first third of the movie. It goes from being a beach movie to a very isolation movie on the boat. It becomes a movie about men alone against nature. I think Quint's Indianapolis speech gives the movie real darkness and weight. Very memorable. The shark becomes more than just an animal. It becomes a force in nature, man. And the thing that's great about Jaws is it proves that you don't need gore every 5 seconds. As much as blood and guts can be fun, man, sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you just need tense atmospheric dread. I think it builds tension better than most horror movies ever made. I think every beach scene after watching Jaws just hits a little different. I think most movies, if there's a beach involved, you instantly think of a shark in the waters. I think that's why it works too, man. I mean, look it up. It's a real thing. After Jaws came out, tourism in the ocean and on beaches went down for a little bit because people were afraid of sharks and getting eaten by sharks. It's a horror movie, an adventure movie, a suspense movie, a small town drama movie, and a blockbuster movie all in one. It's classy enough to be considered one of the greatest movies ever made, but it's still absolutely a horror movie. It belongs at number one to me because not only is it just probably the greatest summer horror movie, but it helped create the idea of a summer movie being an event. Simply put, Jaws is the greatest summer horror movie ever made because it made summer feel dangerous, and that's why I happily put it at number one. But anyways, that's my top 10 summer horror movies, guys. I'm sure it's a very divisive list to some. There are so many summer horror movies out there that this list was kind of difficult to come up with. So let me know what you think. Do you think I'm completely right on Jaws being number one? Am I absolutely wrong on Friday the 13th Part 2 being the best Friday the 13th movie? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe too, and be on the lookout for more videos. And thanks.